The worst betrayals don't come from strangers. They come from the people whose voices feel like home. My name is Emma Carter. And 10 years ago, I lost everything. Not because of a natural disaster. Not because of bad luck. But because the man I trusted most decided that my life was worth sacrificing for his happiness. Even now, 10 years later, I still remember that Tuesday morning. The sunlight poured through the kitchen windows. Coffee brewed softly in the background. The scent of cinnamon toast filled the room. Everything looked normal. Peaceful. Beautiful. The kind of morning people take for granted. If someone had told me that my entire life was about to collapse, I would have laughed. I was 41 years old. Married for 18 years. Mother to a wonderful 12-year-old daughter named Lily. Owner of a comfortable home. Surrounded by family. Supported by friends. At least, that's what I thought. My husband, Daniel, kissed my forehead before leaving for work. The same way he always did. "Love you," he said. I smiled. "Love you too." 3 simple words. 3 devastating lies. After he left, I cleaned the kitchen and started my day. Then, his phone buzzed on the counter. He had forgotten it. I chuckled softly. Typical Daniel. He forgot everything. His wallet. His keys. His lunch. Sometimes even his own birthday. I picked up the phone to call him. Then another notification appeared. A woman's name. Sophia. At first, I didn't think much about it. But then another message appeared. And another. And another. Something inside me tightened. A quiet voice whispered. "Something is wrong." My hands began to tremble. My heartbeat quickened. Slowly, I opened the messages. 1 second. That's all it took. 1 second to destroy 18 years. Last night was amazing. I froze. My stomach dropped. No. There had to be an explanation. There had to be. I kept reading. And with every message, another piece of my heart shattered. Photos. Videos. Hotel reservations. Love letters. Plans for a future. A future that didn't include me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I couldn't move. The room spun around me. 18 years. Gone. Just like that. Destroyed by a glowing screen in my trembling hands. But the affair wasn't the worst part. The worst part was discovering how long it had been happening. 3 years. 3 entire years. 3 years of lies. 3 years of pretending. 3 years of kissing me goodbye every morning. Then giving his heart to someone else. Every birthday. Every anniversary. Every Christmas. Every family vacation. Every school event. Every memory. Poisoned. I stared at our wedding photograph hanging on the wall. The smiling woman in that picture looked happy. Safe. Loved. I barely recognized her. Tears blurred my vision. Then they came faster. And faster. Until I was sitting on the kitchen floor. Completely broken. Not the elegant crying you see in movies. The ugly kind. The kind that steals your breath. The kind that makes your chest ache. The kind that leaves you begging God to wake you up from a nightmare. But this wasn't a nightmare. This was my life. And it was only the beginning. I thought discovering Daniel's affair was the worst thing that could happen to me. I was wrong. Because while I was trying to survive the heartbreak, Daniel was already destroying my life. One person at a time. The first sign came a few days later. I called my sister, Rachel. No answer. Again. No answer. When she finally called back, her voice sounded strange. Cold. Distant. Emma. She said carefully. Maybe you should listen to Daniel. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? There was a long pause. Then she said words that made my heart stop. He thinks you've been struggling with your mental health. I froze. Mental health. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My husband had cheated on me for 3 years. And somehow I was the problem. I laughed in disbelief. But Rachel wasn't laughing. She actually believed him. And that terrified me. That same night, I called my mother. I expected support. I expected comfort. Instead, I got doubt. Maybe Daniel is just worried about you, she said softly. Those words shattered me. I felt like the floor disappeared beneath my feet. Mom, he cheated on me. I know, sweetheart. Then why are you believing him? Silence. Painful silence. The kind that tells you everything. For the first time in my life, I felt abandoned by my own family. Over the next few weeks, things got worse. Friends stopped calling. Invitations disappeared. People avoided me. Whenever I entered a room, conversations suddenly ended. Everyone looked at me differently. Like I was fragile. Like I was unstable. Like I couldn't be trusted. Meanwhile, Daniel played the perfect husband. Calm. Patient. Concerned. He told everyone he was worried about me. And people believed him. Because lies are powerful. When they're told by someone people trust. One afternoon, I confronted him. I was exhausted. Heartbroken. Angry. You've been lying about me. I shouted. Daniel looked up from his desk. Completely calm. Then he picked up his phone. And started recording me. I stared at him. What are you doing? I'm documenting this, he said. Documenting. As if I were dangerous. As if I were unstable. As if my pain wasn't real. That was the moment I understood. Every tear. Every emotional reaction. Every breakdown. He was collecting them. Using them as proof that something was wrong with me. Not because I was unstable. But because I was hurt. And there is a difference. A huge difference. That night, I sat alone in my car. The rain pounded against the windshield. I couldn't go home. I couldn't stop crying. Everything felt broken. My marriage. My family. My future. I kept asking myself the same question. How did this happen? How did the people who knew me my entire life suddenly stop believing me? I had never felt so alone. Not lonely. Alone. Because loneliness is when nobody is around. Being alone is when nobody believes you. And that pain is unbearable. A week later, my parents invited me to dinner. I thought they wanted to help. I thought they wanted to listen. Instead, they held an intervention. My mother. My father. My sister. Daniel. Everyone was there. The atmosphere felt heavy. Uncomfortable. Like they had already made a decision before I arrived. Finally, my father spoke. We think you need help. I stared at him. Then at my mother. Then at Rachel. Nobody looked away. Nobody defended me. Nobody questioned Daniel. Tears filled my eyes. You're serious? My voice barely worked. You actually believe him? The silence answered for them. And in that moment, something inside me broke. Not my mind. My trust. Because the people sitting around that table weren't strangers. They were my family. And they had chosen him. I left without saying goodbye. I drove through the rain for hours. Crying until my chest hurt. Crying until I couldn't breathe. Eventually, I pulled into an empty parking lot. Turned off the engine. And sat there in complete darkness. My reflection stared back at me from the mirror. Red eyes. Trembling hands. A woman I barely recognized. And for the first time, a terrifying thought entered my mind. What if he succeeds? What if everyone believes his lies? What if I lose everything? Because deep down, I already knew the truth. Daniel wasn't finished. Not even close. And the worst part of my nightmare was still coming. To be continued. After that dinner, nothing was the same. The people I loved no longer looked at me the same way. They looked at me with pity. With doubt. With suspicion. And every single day, it became harder to breathe. The first friend to disappear was Sarah. She had been my best friend for nearly 15 years. We had celebrated birthdays together. Vacations together. We had shared secrets. Dreams. Tears. I thought our friendship was unbreakable. Then one morning, I sent her a message. No reply. A second message. Nothing. A phone call. Straight to voicemail. Days passed. Then weeks. Finally, I stopped trying. Because sometimes silence is an answer. And hers was loud enough. Soon others followed. Friends stopped inviting me to gatherings. Neighbors avoided eye contact. People whispered when I walked by. The woman who had once been welcomed everywhere suddenly felt unwanted everywhere. I was losing people faster than I could understand. And nobody bothered asking for my side of the story. Nobody. They simply accepted Daniel's version. Because lies travel faster than truth. Especially when the truth is inconvenient. But losing friends wasn't the worst part. The worst part was watching my daughter get caught in the middle. Lily was only 12. Too young to understand manipulation. Too young to understand betrayal. Too young to carry the burden of adult lies. One afternoon, I picked her up from school. We sat together in the car. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Then she finally looked at me. Her small voice trembling. Mom. I smiled weakly. Yes, sweetheart. She hesitated. Then asked a question that shattered my heart. Are you sick? The world stopped. My chest tightened. I could barely breathe. What do you mean? She looked down at her hands. Dad says you've been having problems. I felt something break inside me. Not anger. Not sadness. Something deeper. Because I realized Daniel wasn't just destroying me anymore. He was poisoning my relationship with my daughter. That night, I cried harder than I ever had before. I sat on the bathroom floor for hours. The same floor where I had once sat helping Lily brush her teeth when she was little. The same floor where she used to laugh. Now all I could hear was silence. And my own heartbreak. I wasn't just losing a marriage. I wasn't just losing friends. I was slowly losing my daughter. And that pain was unbearable. The divorce process started soon after. Every meeting felt like another attack. Every document felt like another wound. Daniel arrived looking calm, confident, collected. I arrived exhausted, broken, barely sleeping, barely eating, barely functioning. And somehow, my pain became evidence against me. Every tear was used to prove I was unstable. Every emotional reaction became another weapon. It felt impossible. The man who betrayed me was being treated like the victim. And I was being treated like the problem. Months passed. Then came the day I feared most. The custody hearing. I still remember walking into that courtroom. My hands were shaking. My stomach felt sick. My entire future sat inside that room. Because this wasn't about money. It wasn't about property. It was about Lily. My little girl. My heart. My reason for living. When Daniel spoke, he sounded convincing. Concerned. Caring. He told the court he was worried about my emotional state. He spoke so calmly that even I almost believed him. Then came the recordings. The videos he had secretly collected. Moments when I was crying. Moments when I was angry. Moments when I was breaking down after discovering his betrayal. Moments any human being would struggle through. But inside that courtroom, they looked different. They looked damaging. They looked exactly the way Daniel wanted them to look. When the hearing ended, the judge made a decision. I wasn't completely separated from Lily. But my access became limited. Restricted. Controlled. The moment I heard those words, my world collapsed. I could survive losing my marriage. I could survive losing friends. I could survive losing money. But this felt impossible. That evening, I drove home alone. I sat inside my car long after arriving. Unable to move. Unable to think. Unable to stop crying. The house felt empty. Cold. Lifeless. Every room reminded me of Lily. Her laughter. Her drawings. Her voice. Her little footsteps running through the hallway. The silence was unbearable. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. I stopped recognizing myself. I lost weight. I stopped sleeping. Food had no taste. Life had no color. Every morning felt heavier than the one before. Sometimes I would wake up and forget everything for a few seconds. Then reality would hit me again. And the pain would return. Stronger than before. One freezing winter evening, I sat alone in my car outside a grocery store. I checked my bank account. $14. That was all I had left. $14. I stared at the screen. Then I laughed. A broken laugh. The kind that comes when you're too exhausted to cry anymore. A few months earlier, I had a family. A home. A future. Now, I had $14. And a heart full of scars. As snow began falling outside, a terrifying thought entered my mind. A thought that frightened me more than anything. What if this is all my life will ever be? What if Daniel wins? What if everyone was right to abandon me? What if I never recover? I sat there for a long time. Listening to the wind. Watching the snow. Feeling completely invisible. Completely forgotten. Completely alone. But what I didn't know then What I couldn't possibly know was that my story wasn't ending. It was only beginning. Because sometimes life breaks you completely before giving you a reason to fight back. And soon, someone unexpected was about to enter my life. Someone who would change everything. After losing so much of my time with Lily, something inside me changed. Not in a good way. Not yet. I was exhausted. Emotionally. Mentally. Physically. Every day felt heavier than the last. Every morning felt like a battle I wasn't sure I could win. The divorce drained what little money I had left. Lawyers. Court fees. Bills. Everything kept piling up. And eventually, the house was gone too. The home where I had celebrated birthdays. The home where Lily took her first steps. The home where I thought I would grow old. Gone. Just like that. I stood in the empty living room one final time. Boxes stacked around me. Walls stripped bare. The silence felt suffocating. I ran my fingers across the doorway where I had marked Lily's height every year. Tiny pencil marks. Tiny memories. Tiny pieces of a life that no longer existed. Tears rolled down my cheeks. I wasn't just leaving a house. I was burying a chapter of my life. The first night was the hardest. I couldn't afford an apartment. I couldn't afford much of anything. So I checked into the cheapest motel I could find. The room smelled like old cigarettes. The carpet was stained. The mattress sagged in the middle. But it was all I had. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed staring at the wall. No television. No conversation. No family. Just silence. The kind of silence that makes you hear every painful thought in your head. I cried until sunrise. Not because I wanted sympathy. Not because I wanted someone to save me. I cried because I was tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of hurting. Tired of losing. The next few months became a blur. I took every job I could find. Cleaning offices. Stocking shelves. Serving coffee. Anything. Everything. I worked mornings. Afternoons. Nights. Sometimes all three. I was 41 years old. Starting over from nothing. While everyone else seemed to be moving forward. One evening after a long shift, I walked into a grocery store. My feet ached. My back hurt. I was carrying a basket with bread, milk, and a few cans of soup. Nothing extra. Nothing unnecessary. When I reached the register, my card was declined. I froze. The cashier tried again. Declined. Again. Declined. The line behind me grew longer. People started staring. Whispering. Waiting. My face burned with embarrassment. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. Finally, I counted the cash in my purse. Not enough. I quietly removed items from the basket. One by one. The milk. The soup. The bread. Until all that remained was the cheapest package of noodles I could find. As I walked out of the store, the cold wind hit my face. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly defeated. That night I called Lily. Hearing her voice was both a blessing and a curse. "Hi, Mom." Her cheerful voice instantly made me smile. For a moment, the pain disappeared. For a moment, everything felt normal. We talked about school. Her friends. A science project she was excited about. Then she asked a simple question. One innocent question. Mom, when can I come home again? Home. The word hit me like a knife. Because I didn't have a home anymore. I looked around the tiny motel room. Peeling wallpaper. Flickering lights. A broken chair in the corner. And my heart shattered all over again. I forced a smile into my voice. Soon, sweetheart. But after hanging up, I broke down completely. Because I had just lied to my daughter. And I hated it. Weeks later, the motel money ran out. I slept in my car several nights. Parked in empty lots. Hoping nobody would notice. Hoping nobody would ask questions. The nights were cold. Lonely. Endless. I remember one particular night. Rain hammered against the windows. The wind shook the car. I wrapped myself in an old blanket and stared into the darkness. My stomach growled. My eyes burned. And tears slipped down my face. I felt invisible. Like the entire world had forgotten I existed. Then something happened. Something that scared me. I stopped recognizing myself. The woman in the mirror looked empty. Broken. Hopeless. One morning I caught my reflection in a gas station bathroom. Dark circles under my eyes. Pale skin. Tired expression. I stared at that woman for a long time. And suddenly, I didn't know who she was anymore. The confident wife. The loving mother. The woman with dreams. She was gone. Or at least, that's what I believed. A few days later, after finishing a cleaning shift in a downtown office building, I sat alone in the lobby. My legs were shaking from exhaustion. I had worked nearly 14 hours. I hadn't eaten all day. I felt completely drained. That's when an elderly woman approached me. She couldn't have known it at the time. But she was about to change my life forever. She looked at me for a moment. Then smiled gently. You carry sadness in your eyes. I laughed softly. A broken laugh. The kind people use when they're trying not to cry. She sat beside me. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Then she said something I would never forget. Sometimes life destroys everything you thought you were. She paused. Then looked directly at me. So you can discover who you were meant to become. I didn't know it then. But those words would become the beginning of my comeback. The beginning of my healing. The beginning of the revenge nobody saw coming. Because my story wasn't over. Not even close. And for the first time in a very long time, a tiny spark of hope appeared in the darkness. That day in the office lobby. I didn't know it yet. But my life was about to change. Not instantly. Not magically. But slowly. Painfully. And for the first time in years. Meaningfully. The elderly woman sat beside me. Calm. Composed. As if she had all the time in the world. And maybe she did. Because people like her don't rush broken people. They understand silence. They understand pain. They understand survival. She looked at me and said softly, you carry sadness in your eyes. I gave a small, broken laugh. The kind that hides tears. I think sadness is all I carry these days, I whispered. She didn't pity me. She didn't react dramatically. She just nodded. Like she understood. Then she said something I would never forget. Sometimes life destroys everything you thought you were. She paused. Looked directly at me. so you can become who you were meant to be. For a moment, I didn't respond. Because words felt heavy. Too heavy. Instead, I looked away. At the floor. At my tired hands. At a life I didn't recognize anymore. And I said quietly, I don't think I'm meant to become anything anymore. Silence. Then she smiled. Not a polite smile. A knowing one. You're still here, she said. That means your story isn't finished. Her name was Margaret. I didn't know it then. But Margaret had lost her own daughter years ago. She had survived grief, loneliness, and betrayal of her own kind. So she recognized it in me instantly. Because pain has a language of its own. And broken people speak it fluently. Over the next few days, I kept seeing her. At first by coincidence. Then intentionally. She would bring me tea during my breaks. Sit with me in silence. Ask simple questions. Did you eat today? Did you sleep at all? Are you safe? No judgment. No pressure. Just presence. And somehow, that was more powerful than anything else. Because I had spent so long being judged. That kindness felt unreal. Suspicious. Almost dangerous. One evening after work, I finally broke. I sat on the curb outside the building. My hands shaking. My body exhausted. And I told her everything. The affair. The lies. The court. My daughter. The homelessness. The humiliation. Everything I had buried inside me came pouring out. I cried so hard I couldn't breathe. I expected her to leave. To get uncomfortable. To say something generic and walk away. But she didn't. She stayed. And she listened. Completely. Without interrupting. Without judging. Just listening. And when I finally finished, I felt empty. Like I had nothing left inside me. Not even pain. That's when she said something unexpected. Do you want revenge? I looked at her in shock. Because I didn't expect that question. Not from someone like her. She continued calmly. Or do you want your life back? I hesitated. Because I didn't know the answer anymore. Revenge had once felt powerful. But now, even that felt far away. Finally I whispered. I just want my daughter back. Her expression softened. That, she said, is where everything begins. From that day, Margaret helped me rebuild. Not with money. Not with shortcuts. But with structure. She helped me find a small job in her friend's company. Data entry. Basic work. Nothing glamorous. But stable. She taught me discipline. Routine. And something I had forgotten. Self-respect. Start small, she would say. But never stop. Some days I believed her. Some days I didn't. But I kept going. Because I had nothing left to lose. Slowly. My life began to change. Not dramatically. Not quickly. But quietly. I stopped sleeping in my car every night. I rented a small room. Then a slightly better one. I started eating properly again. I started thinking clearly again. And for the first time in years, I looked in the mirror and didn't cry. Not because I was healed. But because I was surviving. And survival is the first step toward rebirth. One evening, Margaret handed me a notebook. What is this? I asked. A future, she said simply. Write everything you know. What I know. I laughed. I barely know how to survive. She smiled. Then start there. So I wrote. At first. It was messy. Scattered thoughts. Broken ideas. Fragments of pain. But slowly. Something changed. I began writing about systems. About efficiency. About small business solutions I had learned from my past jobs. And something surprising happened. For the first time. I felt useful again. Not broken. Not abandoned. Useful. 6 months passed. Then a year. I worked during the day. Studied at night. And built small projects in between. Margaret never stopped encouraging me. Even when I doubted myself. Especially when I doubted myself. Because she saw something in me. That I couldn't yet see in myself. Strength. Hidden beneath years of damage. Then one evening. Margaret called me into her office. She looked different that day. Quieter. Softer. And I noticed something in her eyes. Something I didn't understand. Emma, she said gently. I need to tell you something. My stomach tightened. What is it? She hesitated. Then said the words that froze me completely. I don't have much time left. The room went silent. My heart stopped. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. Just when I had finally found someone who believed in me, I might be about to lose her too. And I wasn't ready. Not this time. Not again. The day Margaret told me she didn't have much time left, I felt the ground disappear beneath my feet. Not again. Please. Not again. I had already lost my marriage. My home. My friends. Most of my family. Part of my relationship with Lily. And now, the one person who had believed in me was slipping away too. For a moment, I felt that familiar darkness returning. The darkness that had followed me for years. The darkness that whispered. Give up. You're tired. You've already lost. But this time, something was different. Because Margaret wasn't crying. She wasn't afraid. She simply smiled. Then she reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. Emma. Her voice was calm. Strong. You don't need me anymore. Tears filled my eyes immediately. Yes, I do. She shook her head. No. You needed someone to remind you who you were. A tear rolled down my cheek. And now you remember. A few months later. Margaret passed away peacefully. The phone call came early in the morning. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed. Holding the phone. Unable to move. Unable to speak. Unable to breathe. The woman who had saved my life was gone. And suddenly, the world felt empty again. The funeral was small. Quiet. Simple. Exactly the way she wanted. As people shared stories about her kindness, I realized something. Margaret had spent her entire life helping broken people stand again. She had done it for strangers. For friends. For family. And somehow, for me. When the ceremony ended, I stood beside her grave. The wind brushed against my face. And I whispered words I would never forget. I won't waste the life you helped me rebuild. That promise became my fuel. Every morning. Every night. Every setback. every obstacle. Whenever life became difficult, I remembered that promise. And I kept going. I worked harder than ever before. While others slept, I studied. While others relaxed, I learned. While others complained, I built. Day after day, month after month, year after year. The progress was slow. Painfully slow. But it was progress. And that's all that mattered. I started a small consulting business from my tiny apartment. Nothing fancy. Just a laptop. A folding table. And a dream. At first, nobody noticed. Nobody cared. Nobody believed it would succeed. But I did. Because failure was no longer my greatest fear. Staying broken was. There were nights when I worked until 2 in the morning. Then woke up at 6. There were weeks when I barely slept. Months when every dollar mattered. Times when I questioned everything. But I refused to quit. Because every struggle reminded me of where I had come from. The motel rooms. The empty bank account. The nights sleeping in my car. The humiliation. The loneliness. The pain. I never wanted to return there again. 3 years passed. Then 5. Slowly. The business grew. 1 client became 3. 3 became 10. 10 became 50. And suddenly, the woman who had once counted pennies for food was hiring employees. The woman everyone called unstable was building something real. Something successful. Something nobody could take away. Then came the moment that changed everything. A major company offered me a contract. The biggest opportunity of my life. If I succeeded, everything would change. If I failed, years of work could disappear overnight. The pressure was enormous. But I accepted. And I gave it everything I had. Every skill. Every lesson. Every ounce of determination. 6 months later, the contract became a success. Then another followed. And another. The business exploded. Growth came faster than I could believe. For the first time in years, I wasn't surviving anymore. I was thriving. One evening I sat alone in my new office, looking out over the city skyline. The same city where I once slept in my car. The same city where people whispered about me. The same city where I lost everything. And suddenly, I started crying. Not because I was sad. Not because I was hurt. Because I was proud. For the first time in a decade, I was proud of myself. Not because I had become wealthy. Not because I had become successful. But because I hadn't quit. When life broke me, I stayed. When people abandoned me, I stayed. When everything fell apart, I stayed. And somehow, that made all the difference. Then one afternoon, my assistant entered my office. Emma. Her voice sounded nervous. I looked up from my desk. What is it? She hesitated. Then handed me a folder. You might want to see this. I opened it. And froze. Because staring back at me was a name I hadn't heard in years. Daniel Carter. My ex-husband. My heart began to pound. Not from love. Not from fear. But from something else. Something unexpected. Because according to the documents in front of me, Daniel's perfect life was beginning to collapse. And he had no idea that our paths were about to cross again. For years, I dreamed about this moment. Not the success. Not the money. Not the office overlooking the city. No. I dreamed about the day I would no longer feel broken. The day I could look in the mirror and finally recognize myself again. And somehow, that day had arrived. 10 years earlier, I had been sleeping in my car, counting coins to buy food, crying myself to sleep in motel rooms, wondering if life would ever get better. Now, I was the CEO of a company I built from nothing. The same woman everyone called unstable had built an empire. And nobody could take credit for it. Nobody. Not Daniel. Not my family. Not my former friends. This was mine. Every late night. Every sacrifice. Every tear. Every victory. Mine. The business continued growing. Faster than I ever imagined. We expanded into new cities. New partnerships. New opportunities. People began recognizing my name. Inviting me to conferences. Business events. Interviews. The same society that once whispered about me now applauded me. Funny how success changes people's memories. One afternoon, I stood backstage before giving a speech. Hundreds of people filled the room. Entrepreneurs. Investors. Business leaders. Years ago, speaking in front of a crowd would have terrified me. Now, I felt calm. Confident. Strong. As I walked onto the stage, the audience applauded. And suddenly, a memory hit me. I remembered sitting alone in my car. Rain hitting the windows. Wondering if my life was over. If only that version of me could see this moment. She wouldn't believe it. After the event ended, people lined up to speak with me. To congratulate me. To ask for advice. Then a young woman approached. She looked nervous. Her hands trembling. Her eyes red from crying. And when she spoke, I saw myself. 10 years earlier. Thank you, she whispered. I smiled. For what? Tears filled her eyes. Because your story saved me. My heart stopped. She explained that she was going through a divorce. She felt abandoned. Lost. Broken. And hearing my story gave her hope. In that moment, I understood something important. The pain I survived wasn't meaningless. The suffering wasn't wasted. Because now, it was helping someone else survive theirs. That evening, I returned home. But something was waiting for me. A letter. Simple. Plain. Unexpected. The moment I saw the handwriting, my stomach tightened. I recognized it immediately. Daniel. After all these years. Daniel. For a moment, I simply stared at the envelope. Part of me wanted to throw it away. Part of me wanted to burn it. But curiosity won. Slowly, I opened it and began reading. The letter wasn't what I expected. There was no arrogance. No confidence. No superiority. The man writing those words sounded different. Broken. Desperate. He spoke about regret. About mistakes. About consequences. About losing everything. And then I reached a sentence that made me freeze. Sophia left me. I read it again. Then again. Sophia. The woman he chose over me. The woman he destroyed our marriage for. Gone. As I continued reading, The truth became clear. Daniel's life wasn't perfect anymore. Not even close. His business was failing. His marriage had collapsed. His friends had disappeared. The people who once surrounded him were gone. And suddenly, for the first time, he understood loneliness. The same loneliness he gave me. I set the letter down, walked to the window, and stared at the city lights. Years earlier, I had imagined this moment differently. I thought I would feel victorious, satisfied, maybe even happy. But standing there, I felt none of those things. Because revenge had changed. When I was broken, I wanted Daniel to suffer. Now, I barely thought about him at all. Because healing changes people. Success changes people. Growth changes people. The greatest revenge had already happened. Not because Daniel was losing, but because I had won. Not against him. For myself. A few weeks later, another surprise arrived. My daughter, Lily. Now a young woman. Confident. Intelligent. Beautiful. She sat across from me during dinner. And for the first time in years, we talked openly. About everything. The divorce. The lies. The years we lost. The pain we both carried. Tears filled her eyes. Then she reached across the table and held my hand. Mom. Her voice cracked. I'm sorry I didn't understand. I couldn't speak. I simply squeezed her hand. Because this moment meant more than any business success. More than any award. More than any amount of money. After all those years, I had my daughter back. As we left the restaurant, my phone vibrated. A message. Unknown number. I opened it. And immediately froze. There were only 6 words. 6 words that changed everything. Emma. I need to see you. Daniel. After 10 years. After all the lies. After all the damage. After all the suffering. He wanted to meet. And deep down, I knew exactly why. Because his world was collapsing. And mine had never been stronger. The question wasn't whether I would see him. The question was, what would happen when the man who destroyed my life finally came face to face with the woman who survived it? The message stayed on my phone for hours. Emma. I need to see you. 6 simple words. But those 6 words carried 10 years of history. 10 years of pain. 10 years of silence. 10 years of unanswered questions. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I missed Daniel. Not because I loved him. That version of me was gone. The woman who cried over him. The woman who begged for answers. The woman who blamed herself. She no longer existed. But something still bothered me. One question. Why now? Why after 10 years? Why after destroying my life? Why after taking everything from me? 3 days later, I agreed to meet him. Not because he deserved it. Because I deserved closure. The meeting was scheduled at a small coffee shop downtown. A quiet place. Neutral ground. The kind of place where strangers came and went without noticing each other. I arrived early. Sat near the window. And waited. Then I saw him. Walking toward the cafe. And for a moment, I barely recognized him. The confident man who once controlled every room he entered was gone. His shoulders were slumped. His hair was thinner. His face looked older. Tired. Defeated. Like life had finally caught up with him. When he sat across from me, neither of us spoke. Not at first. 10 years of silence filled the space between us. Finally, Daniel looked down at the table and whispered, "I'm sorry." The words hung in the air. Heavy. Late. Painfully late. Years ago, those words might have meant everything. Now, they felt empty. I studied his face, searching for anger, arrogance, manipulation. But all I saw was regret. Real regret. The kind that arrives when consequences can no longer be avoided. Then he said something unexpected. "Sophia lied to me." I stared at him, confused. "What do you mean?" He swallowed hard. Then told me a story I never saw coming. Apparently, Sophia's relationship with him hadn't ended peacefully. It ended with betrayal. The same betrayal he once inflicted on me. She had secretly manipulated company finances, hidden transactions, forged documents. And when the investigation began, she protected herself by exposing everyone else, including Daniel. Then came the biggest shock. The documents she revealed exposed years of lies. Not just financial lies. Personal lies. Old emails. Private conversations. Messages. Evidence. Evidence proving that Sophia had helped Daniel create the false narrative about my mental health. Evidence showing how they carefully planned everything. How they twisted situations. Recorded emotional moments. Manipulated stories. And spread rumors. All while making themselves appear innocent. My heart pounded. Not from pain. Not anymore. But from disbelief. For 10 years. People questioned me. For 10 years. People doubted me. For 10 years. The truth sat hidden behind closed doors. And now, the truth was finally coming out. Within weeks, the scandal exploded. Friends who once supported Daniel disappeared. Business partners walked away. Investors pulled out. The media got involved. Rumors spread everywhere. The same way rumors once spread about me. Only this time, the rumors were true. Then something happened that surprised me even more. My family called. One by one. My mother first. Then Rachel. Then my father. The conversations were difficult. Painful. Awkward. Because what do you say after 10 years of believing the wrong person? What do you say after abandoning someone who needed you most? My mother cried during the call. Real tears. The kind that come from guilt. "Emma." Her voice trembled. "We were wrong. For years." I imagined hearing those words. I thought they would heal everything. But they didn't. Some wounds don't disappear with an apology. Some scars remain. Still. I listened. Because carrying anger forever is exhausting. And I was finally tired of carrying things that no longer belonged to me. Then came the public apology. Daniel released a statement. A detailed statement. Admitting what happened. Admitting the manipulation. Admitting the lies. Admitting the damage he caused. The entire city seemed shocked. But I wasn't. Because I had lived the truth for 10 years. I didn't need confirmation. I needed peace. A few days later, I stood alone in my office. looking out over the city skyline. The same city that once whispered about me. The same city that doubted me. The same city that believed I was unstable. And now, the truth was finally visible. For everyone. My assistant entered quietly. Emma. I turned around. She smiled. You were right all along. I looked out the window again. The city lights blurred slightly through tears. Not tears of sadness. Not tears of revenge. Tears of release. Because after 10 years, I no longer had to prove anything. Not to my family. Not to strangers. Not even to myself. The truth had finally spoken. But the story wasn't over. Not yet. Because while the truth had destroyed Daniel's reputation, it had also destroyed his life. His business was collapsing. His marriage was over. His friends were gone. And soon, he would show up at my door one final time. Not as the man who once destroyed me, but as a man with nothing left. A man desperate for forgiveness. A man completely alone. And what happened next would become the most important decision of my life. A month after the truth came out, I thought my story with Daniel was finally over. I thought the chapter had closed. The lies had been exposed. The apologies had been made. And I had finally found peace. But life had one more scene left to write. It was a cold Thursday evening. I had just finished a long day at the office. The city lights glowed outside my window. Employees were heading home. The building was becoming quiet. For the first time all day, I allowed myself a moment to breathe. Then my assistant knocked softly on the door. Emma. I looked up. Her expression seemed uncertain. There's someone here to see you. I frowned. Who is it? She hesitated. Then answered. Daniel. For a moment, everything went silent. Not because I was afraid. Not because I was angry. But because I wasn't expecting him. Not here. Not now. After everything that had happened. I walked to the glass window overlooking the reception area. And there he was. Sitting alone. Head lowered. Hands clasped together. The sight shocked me. Not because it was Daniel. But because he looked nothing like the man I once knew. The confident businessman was gone. The man who walked through life believing he could control everyone was gone. What remained was a tired man. A broken man. A lonely man. I took a deep breath. Then told my assistant. Send him in. A few moments later, he stepped into my office. And the silence between us felt heavier than ever. 10 years of pain. 10 years of consequences. 10 years of separate lives. Standing face to face. Daniel sat down slowly. His eyes moved around the office. The awards. The certificates. The photographs. The success. Everything he once believed I could never achieve. Then he looked at me. And I saw tears forming in his eyes. Real tears. Not manipulation. Not performance. Pain. For several seconds, he couldn't speak. Then finally, his voice cracked. Emma. I waited. He lowered his head. And started crying. The man who once destroyed my life was crying in front of me. I lost everything. His words barely escaped his lips. I know. That was all I said. Because it was true. I knew. Everyone knew. His company was gone. His reputation was destroyed. His marriage had collapsed. His closest friends had disappeared. Even some family members had distanced themselves. The same isolation he once created for me had become his reality. He wiped his eyes. Then whispered, "I deserve it." The room fell silent. Because for the first time, Daniel wasn't making excuses. He wasn't blaming anyone else. He wasn't defending himself. He was finally facing the truth. Then he looked directly at me and asked the question I knew was coming. The question he had probably rehearsed 100 times. "Can you forgive me?" Years earlier, that question would have destroyed me. Years earlier, I would have cried, screamed, demanded answers, demanded justice, demanded accountability. But the woman sitting in that office wasn't the same woman anymore. That woman had died long ago. I looked at him quietly. Then I remembered everything. The affair. The lies. The court hearings. The nights sleeping in my car. The empty motel rooms. The birthdays I missed with Lily. The loneliness. The humiliation. The pain. Every scar. Every tear. Every moment. Then I remembered something else. Margaret. The woman who saved my life. Her words echoed in my mind. Your revenge is not destroying him. Your revenge is becoming someone he can never reach again. A small smile appeared on my face. Not a cruel smile. Not a victorious smile. A peaceful one. And then I answered. Yes. Daniel froze. His eyes widened. For a moment, hope appeared on his face. Then I continued. I forgive you. Tears rolled down his cheeks. But before he could speak, I added something else. Something he needed to hear. Forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. The hope on his face began fading. Forgiveness doesn't rebuild trust. I paused. It doesn't reopen closed doors. The room became silent. I forgive you, Daniel. But I will never go back. His shoulders dropped. The reality finally reached him. There would be no second chance. No reunion. No return to the past. That chapter was over. Forever. For several seconds. Neither of us spoke. Then he nodded slowly. As if he finally understood. Not just my words. But the consequences. The true consequences. Because some mistakes cost more than money. More than reputation. More than success. Some mistakes cost people. Eventually he stood up. Slowly. Quietly. He looked around the office one last time. Then back at me. And whispered. I'm sorry. This time. The words felt different. Not because they fixed anything. But because they were finally honest. I watched him walk toward the door. The same man who once walked away from me. The same man who left me broken. Now leaving completely alone. When the door closed behind him, I didn't feel happiness. I didn't feel revenge. I didn't feel victory. What I felt was freedom. Because I no longer carried the weight of what he had done. And that freedom was worth more than anything. But my story wasn't ending with Daniel. Because the greatest chapter of my life was still waiting ahead. And it would begin with a final choice. A choice about who I wanted to be. Not as a victim. Not as a survivor. But as the woman I had become. After Daniel walked out of my office, I sat there alone, staring at the closed door, listening to the silence. The same silence that had once terrified me. The same silence that had followed me through motel rooms, through empty parking lots, through sleepless nights. But this silence felt different. This silence felt peaceful. Because for the first time in 10 years, there was nothing left to fight. The war was over. Not because I had defeated Daniel. Not because he had lost everything. But because I had finally found myself again. And that victory meant more than revenge ever could. A few weeks later, I received another phone call. This time from my mother. For years, our relationship had been fragile, damaged, careful, like walking across broken glass. The pain of her choosing Daniel's lies over my truth never fully disappeared. Some wounds don't. When I answered the phone, she was crying. "Emma." Her voice trembled. "I don't expect forgiveness." Silence. "I just wanted to tell you how proud I am." My eyes filled with tears. Because for years, those were the words I needed most. Not when I became successful. Not when I built my company. Not when I appeared on magazine covers. Back when I was sleeping in my car. Back when I was broken. Back when I needed my mother. But life doesn't always give us support when we need it. Sometimes it arrives much later. And we must decide what to do with it. That evening, I invited my parents to dinner. Not because everything was fixed. Not because the pain was gone. But because healing sometimes means opening a door, without pretending the damage never happened. And for the first time in years, we talked honestly. No excuses. No lies. No pretending. Just truth. The kind of truth that hurts before it heals. Months passed. Life became calmer. Simpler. Peaceful. The business continued growing. But success no longer defined me. Money no longer defined me. Even my past no longer defined me. Because I had learned something important. Your worst chapter is not your entire story. One sunny afternoon, Lily and I sat together in a park, watching children play. The same way I used to watch her when she was little. She smiled and leaned her head against my shoulder. Then she asked softly, "Mom?" I smiled. "Yes." She looked at me for a moment. Then said something that made my heart stop. "How did you survive all of it?" The question lingered in the air. And suddenly, I saw every version of myself. The wife who discovered the affair. The mother who lost her home. The woman sleeping in her car. The broken soul crying on a motel bed. The survivor rebuilding from nothing. Every version. Every scar. Every battle. I smiled. Then answered honestly. I stopped waiting for someone to save me. Lily listened carefully. And I continued. When people abandoned me, I learned how to stand alone. When life broke me, I learned how to rebuild. And when the world told me I wasn't enough, I stopped listening. Tears filled her eyes. And mine. Because the greatest lesson of my life wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about success. It wasn't even about survival. It was about self-worth. Understanding that your value doesn't disappear because someone fails to see it. Understanding that betrayal says more about the betrayer than the betrayed. Understanding that even when everything falls apart, you still have the power to begin again. Years later, I would occasionally hear updates about Daniel. His life remained difficult. Quiet. Lonely. The people he once sacrificed everything for were gone. The friends who celebrated his victories had disappeared. And the future he once imagined never arrived. Meanwhile, my life continued moving forward. Not perfectly. Not without challenges. But with purpose. With peace. With people who genuinely cared. And most importantly, with myself. One evening, I stood on the balcony of my home, looking at the sunset. The sky painted with shades of gold and orange. Beautiful. Calm. Hopeful. I thought about the woman I used to be. The woman crying in a car with $14 in her bank account. The woman convinced her life was over. If I could speak to her now, I would tell her this. Hold on. The people who leave are not the end of your story. The people who betray you are not the authors of your future. And one day, you will thank yourself for not giving up. Because the truth is, they took my marriage. They took my reputation. They took my home. They took years of my happiness. But they never took my strength. I simply hadn't discovered it yet. And that was the greatest twist of all. The woman they called unstable built an empire. The woman they abandoned found her purpose. The woman they tried to destroy became unstoppable. And in the end, my greatest revenge wasn't watching Daniel lose everything. My greatest revenge was proving that I could still win.